Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, as a teacher, I'd like to explain how the school closures that were finally announced several weeks after they should have been really has still not been completed, is still being made a mess of by the government because they haven't thought this through. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, the government last week started to get a little bit serious, and I only mean a little bit, about social distancing. But that, in terms of the surrounding issues around that, that's another topic. But when it comes to schools, many members of the public may think, well, they've made the announcement now to close schools, so that's that part of it sorted, isn't it? It is not. Because although I do this now, I do a little bit of cover teaching, so I'm still in the education system. So I went in on Friday to do my couple of classes of cover, and that's the last day for that college. So the students are not expected to go in after that Friday. Then that was the last one. We're now doing the lessons remotely. Now, the fact that I'm all ready to go with that, and it's all done and dusted, and the students have had the information they need so that they know how to access the learning remotely and get in touch with me and all the rest of it, is because, as you might imagine, the education sector is going to be largely staffed with well-informed, intelligent people. We knew this was coming even before the government were talking about it. It was inevitable. It had to happen. And I don't just mean because the government had to, at some point, make the same decision. Many schools and colleges were going to have to close anyway. Take Friday, for example. So I went in on Friday. That was the last day for students to be in. Many students were not in. Some of them were self-isolating. Some of them just weren't in. I actually don't blame them for that, and their parents who would have made that decision, because they'll be thinking, some of them will have been thinking, well, hang on a minute, this should have already been done. The UK and the US government, when it comes to that, have been really slow. Other countries have the countries that have put in social distancing right away are the ones who are having the fewest deaths from this. Why would I risk my kid by sending them in for one last day? You wouldn't, or that was 2 days as it was for some of them. So I understood that. It was just a little aside, by the way, it was a little upsetting for some of those students, actually, because it dawned on them towards the end there that they'd be leaving the college, but not just for the weekend, but for good. Even though we're still going to be doing the remote learning, they're not going back to the college. For some of those students, some of the second years, we're talking about the ones who'd be leaving and going to university or job or apprenticeship, and they realised they weren't going to see their teachers and they weren't going to see the college. But anyway, so I was in on that Friday. Now, let's say the government hadn't made that decision. I think that college was going to be closing anyway for this, because half the staff are off. Half the staff are self-isolating. The staff, are ill, because you get illnesses at the best of times anyway. So it wasn't actually feasible. There was hardly any of us in the department. Even last Wednesday, before the announcement was made, there were half our department were gone, but this time it's like half the college. The staff absence list was huge. Why is that green? What's going on there? Is my hand green? I don't know what's happening there. But half were gone. So a lot of these things would have to have happened anyway. Now, in terms of what happens now, because it has been announced, but you'll also notice that the Prime Minister has said, but kids who have special needs, or though the children of key workers who cannot just stay off and look after the kids, and the childcare doesn't exist in the country for this, they'll still go to school and if necessary, college. You would think college much less need, because at that age they can look after themselves. But let's say they were particularly, if they had particular needs, that may be open for that. Now, and you think to yourself, well, that's okay, that's fine. Is it okay? Remember what I've just said. Some schools would have had to close anyway because they don't have enough staff. And you'd be thinking, well, you don't need as many staff because there won't be as many kids going in. There will for some schools. If you've got schools who have kids where a lot of them work for key industries, healthcare, there's a lot of nurses or doctors as parents or other key workers. There will be some schools where actually it can represent a lot of children, but the number of staff they have through illness and self-isolation is not enough. The government haven't put anything in place for that yet. And again, the reason will be because they're playing catch-up. Because they didn't think through this scenario. They didn't even war game this scenario 2 months ago when they should have done. They haven't thought of all the knock-on effects. So what's happening is they're making an announcement because they have to. And they had to. I'm not saying they should have put that off. Good God. They had to do that as soon as possible. But they're then waiting for things to happen. So now what has to happen? The situation arises. Teaching leaders will say to the government, well, now we've got this problem, and the government's adding it to the in pile of things they have to now think of a policy for. And the problem is, of course, we have a government that is not exactly filled with the best and brightest. You know, any decent government at this point, if they landed, I mean, a decent government wouldn't have landed themselves in this situation, but if they had have done, you know, it'd be really tricky. There's a lot of things they've got to decide in a lot of different areas. So now there is another problem. And yet there's another problem as well in terms of the relationship between the schools and the communities, because I know that schools are already being asked. There's people who are not key workers, but they are still going to work, who are asking the school, well, you need to take my child because I can't, you know, low paid workers, basically. Low paid workers whose business is still trading and they still need to go to work. And they can't afford childcare because they're on too low a wage, or can't get childcare for whatever other reason. And so school's going to be in a difficult position where they're going to have a load of children or a load of parents of children that are not, you know, shouldn't be in school. And remember, the purpose of closing the school is not just a necessity because there just aren't the teachers to do it. That would have been a good enough reason. It is to maximise social distancing. It's not even like the school can really say to those parents, yeah, you can bring your kid in. Every extra kid that goes to that school is risking greater infection. We know that social distancing works. We've seen it in countries that have actually practiced it properly. We know it works. The more social distancing you have, the better, which means, conversely, the less you have, the worse it is. Literally, every extra child that you say can go to school is creating a massive problem. And again, when we talk about you don't need as many teachers for a certain number of kids, again, you still sort of do. Because what you absolutely don't want to do, I mean, these kids, bear in mind, will not be learning a curriculum, by the way. It'll just be daycare. That'll all it'll be. The teachers will just be engaging them where they can. They won't be doing proper lessons. It'll actually be a good opportunity to teach some softer skills, for example. But effectively doing something that engages the kids, something fun, something useful, but not according to a curriculum. I mean, that would be a great teaching opportunity. Yeah, that'd be the sort of thing I'd relish. But what you can't do is just get a load of people into a classroom. You've got to still have that distancing, even within a classroom. So you need to have much smaller classes, which means you need more teachers. But if teachers are self-isolating, you can't. So this is still a real problem. The closing of the schools has not solved the problem because the schools haven't actually properly closed. They've just sent a load of kids home is what's really happened. Calling it a school closure is actually a misnomer. So hopefully that brings you up to speed with that. There are several other education related issues that I'll come to as well in due course. If you've got any comments, any questions, then throw those down below. Of course, if you found the video interesting, then please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.